Hey there, today I have an order summary video, and in this video I'm going to break down the 3 orders that I recently unboxed. These were orders that I placed with G-Mart Comics. This video is the companion video for unboxing episode 192, and these 3 orders were primarily retailer incentives that I picked up from G-Mart Comics, and a lot of the books were on sale. But then after looking at the availability of these books currently, maybe they weren't on sale at all, and this is just their regular price. They're regularly price reduced at these amounts. So let me go ahead and share the order summaries for each of the 3 orders. Okay, so these 3 orders were placed at random times. One was a holdover from August 9th, 2023, and then January 2nd, 2024 and February 5th, 2024. They were all roughly somewhere between $90 and $110. The general, I guess, feelings that I have is the orders felt maybe mediocre or underwhelming. I think that while there were some 9.8 candidates that I have set aside for sending off to CGC for a 9.8 pre-screen, the majority of the books were, I would definitely say, ungradable, but almost to the point where they're not even worth keeping. And this is something that I thought about as I still struggle with collecting retailer incentives. There's part of me that likes the thrill of it. I enjoy this part of the hobby. I genuinely do. But I know that it kind of goes against my general principles of collecting. And one example of something that I'm working through is when you're buying a retailer incentive, you're typically buying one in 25 or one in 50. It's not like you're buying 50 of these things. It just doesn't make economic sense to do so. And what ends up happening is you have one chance to get that book in the grade that you want to get it at. And many of these didn't grade out. And so you end up kind of being disappointed because this might be your only chance at having a 1 in 25 of Cobra Commander #1 by Steve Epting. Now, again, I paid $17.99, $18.34 for that in total when I factor in. I have this marked shipping and handling, but this really should say bag and board service. The shipping was free for all 3 orders, but nevertheless, the total door-to-door cost for that book was $18.34. And there is a defect on that book that cannot be pressed, and I have it as a 9.6. And that's just the way that book is. Now, I've decided to keep it, which is great, but with retailer incentives, I'm really looking for books that have the potential to maybe be double ratio or at least be at ratio, that have collectability, desirability, where it would make sense to go ahead and grade them. And when you put a lot of stock into that one specific issue and it's kind of a make or break thing, it feels like an all or nothing type of situation. And I've said this before, like if I were to take the first order, for example, and it looks like I got 3 9.8 candidates here in the first order. So 3 out of 7, 43%, getting a 9.8. This was probably the best of the 3 orders. Let's look at what I paid for the non 9.8 books. Now, it's quite random, right? You can't specifically say these are the books that will get the 9.8, these that won't. But Wonder Woman #5, $11. Cobra Commander #1, 1 in 10, another $7. Here's $18.34 for that Cobra Commander, the 1 in 25, and then an additional $10 for Star Wars: The High Republic 3. So somewhere around $45 worth of comics. And then if someone were to say, okay, you can buy those 4 books for $45 and they're not 9.8s, or I will sell you Cobra Commander #1, the 1 in 25, for $45, but it's guaranteed a 9.8. Maybe that's not the best example because of the fair market value of that book, but let's say I was making a trade. So I've already spent the money and somebody had a very clean 9.8 copy. You're looking at it, and then you've got the 4 books that are somewhere between the 9.2 and 9.6 range, and you just feel like, what am I going to do with these? Are these really worthy of being in my permanent personal collection? I don't know. Maybe, but I could trade for a book that I know I want to have, and I know I potentially want to grade out and maybe even display, and you're kind of excited about it, then yes, I would trade the books. So to me, that means that I would also pay the $45 for that book instead of paying. So it's more of like you're committed for this amount of money. You know you're going to spend it. And that's always the struggle that I have after the fact. I think before, when I'm hunting the retailer incentives, or I get the email notifications about pre-ordering and all of that, or I watch other videos talk about some sort of new 1 in 25 that's coming out, or an artist posts something on Instagram, I get very excited. But when I grade these books out, I really feel negative about the whole situation, and it's just part of the emotions of collecting. Of course, I wouldn't feel as bad if they were all 9.8s, but even so, if you're looking at column V, very few of these have any CGC value. The ones that do, you could say, were wins, were good pickups. Superman number 9, the Nathan Zerdy 1 in 25. I did pre-screen that one myself at a 9.8. That has a value of $100 in a CGC 9.8. And Wolverine 7, the Art Adams cover, I gave a 9.8. That is valued at $110. And so those were very positive pickups. You can see here CGC value. If I were to send those books straight away to CGC and they came back a 9.8, I would stand to add roughly $93 of value between the two of those books. There we go, 93, those two books added together. So that makes sense for this, the third order here, where again, I got 3 9.8s, but Uncanny Avengers number 5, the Stephanie Hans 1 in 25, no value in a 9.8. And the last book that I'll point out that was probably my biggest disappointment was the book that I spent the most on. Barnstormers number 1, I paid $55.34 just for that book, and I graded it as an 8.0. I often do this where I get, let's just say, emotional, frustrated, disappointed, you name it. Also, real quick, this order was from August. I'm not going to contact G-Mart and say, hey, this book was damaged, or you sent me a rough copy and I paid a lot of money. Too much time has passed. We're talking about 6 months that I had placed this order. Who knows? There's no way that they would honor such a request, and I don't want to bother them, and that's something that I know I just have to accept and move on from. But I ended up going online and searching eBay for this book. And what I noticed is that the value of this book, you can see, cover price has this as $29, the fair market value for this book raw. This book was hot for a couple of minutes when it came out and then fell off. And at that moment that it was released, that was the time that I really FOMO'd hard for that book and wanted to track it down and wanted to find it. And I found that copy on G-Mart and I was like, well, it's $55. Do I really want to spend that much? Now, my logic here was I had noticed that the fair market value of the book had dropped to $29. And when I noticed that, I kind of got excited again, thinking, well, maybe this is my chance to pick up a different copy and move on from this, even though I overpaid for this book. And the first thing I did is I went to eBay and I looked at recently sold copies. And I also wanted to see if there were any CGC copies. And I noticed that there was a signed CGC Signature Series 9.8 signed by Jenny Frison that ended at $81. And I was kicking myself because, first of all, Frison's signature fee is $85. I paid $55 for it. I could have just waited and bought a signed copy already slabbed in a 9.8 instead of buying this book raw for $55, and I was just kicking myself. Now, I thought, well, I don't know how many of these books are out there. Let me just do a standard search to see. I wasn't anticipating searching for a CGC graded copy of Barnstormers number 1. And when I searched, there was somebody that had a Signature Series 9.8 for sale. Long story long, I made an offer. They countered. I countered again. They countered back, and I accepted their offer. And this is the book that I just picked up. So I don't know what you call this, overreacting or ultra FOMO, but it's definitely like stacking FOMO. I immediately FOMO'd back in August for the book, and then FOMO'd again when I unboxed this order because I was so upset that the book was just, the corners were blunted. There was chipping along the edge. There was creasing on the back. I have it as an 8.0 because, yes, there are a lot of defects. They're minor, but it's just the collective sum of the defects it's making it an 8.0 for me. Not only did I get the book signed by Jenny Frison, it is also co-signed by Tula Lotay. So two of my favorite artists, the cover artist and the interior artist and co-creator of Barnstormers, they both signed it. I accepted that final counter, already paid for it, and I already got the shipping notification for it, and I'm thrilled. I just wish I hadn't have spent the $55 in the first place. So if that doesn't teach me a lesson to just wait for incentives to either have some sort of correction or just go through their typical journey of coming out at ratio and then dropping, I don't know what lesson I would need to learn otherwise, because that was a pretty tough and lesson to learn. But I did end up with, I think, an even more interesting and cooler copy to add to my collection as a 9.8. So in summary, here we have the three orders. I would say just kind of mid or meh. They just kind of zeroed out in terms of raw value. You could see here, this was basically a break even. This was a $20 loss, and the third order was a $20 gain. Not a lot of CGC value. I am planning on sending the Wolverine 40 and the Superman 9 in for a pre-screen. I may send up a couple of the other 9.8s just because I think by the time they would come back, there could be some graded copies that have sold. The Marilyn Moonlight Superman 10 Lyrics Lee cover, that got a 9.8, so I'll probably send that one in. And then just because I'm collecting the Brad Walker G.I. Joe, 303 got a 9.8, so I was happy about that. 302 got a 9.6, so I'm going to probably let that one go and see if I can replace it. So those are the three orders. You know, another lesson learned in comic book collecting, although I think this is the same lesson, and I think I've had many people also offer me their unsolicited advice is to just either stay away from ratios, you know, buy what you like. Don't worry about the cost or the value. If you're buying a ratio, you're buying it for specific reasons because you love the cover artist. You're speculating on something about it, but it's really more about the attraction of the incentive, something about it. Typically, it's the cover art, or maybe a specific character, in the case of Marilyn Moonlight, being on the cover of that origin book that makes sense to go ahead and invest in it a little bit further instead of just buying the standard cover A. And I get all of that. I still get caught up in it. At least I would say I didn't pay at ratio for any of the other books except for Barnstormers #1. It just kind of unfortunately worked out to be the one that was in the worst shape across roughly these 20 books. Let me know what you think of these three orders from G-Mart. I think I can already hear your feedback in your comments, which is either stay away or wait for them later because they'll probably still be available in many places, probably for either at the prices that I paid or even less. Thanks for watching, happy collecting, and see you next time.